Stop for a second. Take a deep breath. Now, try to answer honestly. Why are you here? Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the catchy title. But what if I told you that this choice wasn't really yours? That before you even decided to click on this video, your brain had already made that decision for you. And it's only now giving you the illusion that it was your choice. Sounds crazy, right? But what if I showed you that this happens all the time? Imagine a courtroom. The judge reviews the evidence, listens to the lawyers, and finally delivers a verdict. It seems like a purely rational decision, but a study revealed something unsettling. Judges tend to give much harsher sentences before lunch and are much more lenient after eating. In other words, a person's fate may be decided not by law, not by morality, but by a judge's hunger. And if something as trivial as hunger can influence such a serious decision, what does that say about your choices? What you wear, what you eat, who you trust, who you love, what you desire? You believe you're making all these decisions freely, but what if your brain had already made them for you? Without even asking for your input, philosophy and science are about to show you something unsettling. Free will might just be a trick of the mind. And today, we're going to question everything you think you know about your own freedom. If there's one thing that makes us feel human, it's the sense that we're in control. Since childhood, we've been told that we are responsible for our choices, that the future is in our hands. But is that really true? Or is our cherished freedom just a role in the grand theater of consciousness? The idea of free will is simple. We believe we have the power to make decisions independently of external influences. You choose to get out of bed or hit the snooze button. You decide whether you want coffee or tea. It seems obvious that these are free choices, right? But philosophers have spent centuries debating whether this freedom is real, or just an elaborate illusion. The first to raise this question was Aristotle. Over 2,000 years ago, he believed that human choices were the result of reason, and that each of us was responsible for our own actions. To him, if someone makes a mistake, they can't blame fate or the gods. The blame is entirely theirs. This idea has shaped our understanding of morality and justice to this day. After all, if we don't have free will, how can we be judged for our mistakes? But not everyone bought into this idea. Centuries later, Schopenhauer threw a wrench into the discussion. He said, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." Sounds confusing. Let's break it down. You can choose to get off the couch and go to the gym, but you can't simply decide to want to work out if, deep down, you hate it. Your desires aren't a product of your will, but of something much deeper. Past experiences, conditioning, maybe even your biology. In other words, you have the freedom to act, but not to choose the desires that drive you. And then comes Nietzsche. As always, to shatter our certainties, he questioned whether morality itself, built on the idea of free choice, actually made sense. To him, society created the notions of guilt and merit as a way to keep people in check, like a grand theater where we think we have freedom. But in reality, we're just following invisible scripts. If every choice we make is shaped by our environment, culture, and instincts, can we truly be held responsible for anything? Now, think of a time when you made a decision you didn't want to make. Something inside you said, "Don't do it." But you did it anyway. Why does that happen if we are truly free? Why do we so often go against our own will? Maybe this is the strongest proof that our freedom isn't as absolute as we like to believe. Free will, then, isn't just a philosophical concept. It's an existential dilemma. Are we the masters of our destiny, or merely spectators watching decisions that have already been made within us? If philosophy had already cracked the illusion that we are truly free, neuroscience came along with a sledgehammer to break it down completely. For centuries, we believed that our decisions came from our conscious mind, that we think, reflect, and only then make a choice. But what if I told you that your brain has already made the decision before you even realize it? That's exactly what a shocking experiment conducted in 1983 by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet revealed. The idea was simple. Volunteers sat in front of a clock and were asked to move their wrist whenever they felt like it, paying attention to the exact moment they felt the intention to act. Meanwhile, Machines recorded their brain activity, the expected outcome, that the brain would only show signs of action after the conscious decision was made. After all, if we are free to choose, we must first decide. And only then does the brain send the command to the body, right? But the results were unsettling. The brain began preparing for movement about 300 milliseconds before the person became aware that they had made a decision. It might seem like a minor technical detail, but think about what this means. The moment you feel like you've made a choice, your brain was already working on it before you even realized. What we call a conscious decision might just be a trick. Mental theater, where the conscious mind takes credit for a choice that was actually made behind the scenes. If this were just an isolated case, we might still question it. But since then, numerous studies have confirmed the same thing and taken it even further. Researchers can now predict decisions before the person is even aware of making them. In 2008, scientists from the Max Planck Institute in Germany conducted a study using functional MRI scans, analyzing brain activity patterns while volunteers freely chose between two buttons. The shocking result: up to 10 seconds before the person was consciously aware of their choice, the machine already knew which button they were going to press. Now, think about your everyday life. How many times have you made a decision out of nowhere, without really knowing why? Maybe you changed your mind at the last minute, followed an inexplicable impulse, or simply felt that a choice was the right one. Often, we rationalize it afterward. Oh, I chose this route because it seemed faster. Or, I did this because it was the most logical thing to do. But what if the truth is completely different? What if your brain had already made the decision long before you realized it? And all you do is come up with justifications to make sense of what was already set in motion. This discovery raises an even bigger problem. If decisions are made before they reach our consciousness, how can we say we have control over them? If your brain decides first and only then gives you the illusion that it was your choice, are you really the author of your own life? Could it be that all the certainty you have about your decisions is nothing more than an elaborate illusion? If philosophy once made us doubt our freedom, science is now rubbing an uncomfortable fact in our faces. We have far less control over our choices than we think. If neuroscience has shown that our own brain makes decisions before we are even aware of them, what happens when we add another factor to the equation? The environment. Because if we don't even have full control over ourselves, imagine the impact of everything around us: culture, language, visual, and social stimuli. Could what we call free will be nothing more than a set of programmed responses shaped by the world we live in? Let's do a test. Do you think you've decided what you'll eat tomorrow? Or that you freely chose your favorite music? Now think about this. What if you had been born in another country? If you had grown up listening to completely different music, speaking a language that views time in a completely different way, would your preferences still be the same? Studies show that even the language we speak alters our perception of reality. For example, speakers of ancient Greek saw the future as something coming from behind them and the past as something in front. The exact opposite of our Western perspective. If something as basic as language can shape the way we perceive time, what else in our lives might be influenced without us realizing it? The answer is almost everything. From the commercials we see on TV to the design of the apps we use on our phones, everything is carefully crafted to guide our choices without us noticing. Have you ever realized that supermarkets place the most expensive products at eye level? Or that social media platforms organize their feeds in a way that keeps you scrolling for as long as possible? If you truly believe you freely choose what you consume, then why are algorithms able to predict what you'll watch before you even know? This isn't a new problem. Humans have always been vulnerable to invisible influences. Think about advertising. Decades ago, it was already possible to manipulate preferences using slogans and persuasive commercials. But today, things have become even more sophisticated. If before we had to see a commercial on TV to be influenced, now just existing on the internet is enough. Do you really think you chose to buy that product? Or was it the marketing, the targeted ads, the spontaneous recommendations that kept popping up in your feed? The psychologist Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, showed that we make most of our decisions automatically. Without really thinking, he divides our brain into two systems. One fast and impulsive, acting on autopilot, and another slower, which tries to rationalize things afterward. And do you know which one is in charge most of the time? The first one. Now, think about your day. How many of your decisions were truly yours? What did you watch? What did you eat? What did you wear? Were they conscious choices, or just automatic reactions to external stimuli? If an algorithm can predict what you'll buy or watch, can we really call that free will? The truth is uncomfortable, but inescapable. Most of our choices are not really choices. They are programmed responses shaped by our environment, our culture, and the invisible structures surrounding us. If our brain decides before we do, and the world around us shapes those decisions before they even reach our awareness, what is left of the idea of freedom? If free will is an illusion, then what happens to the idea of responsibility? All our lives, we've been taught that we are responsible for our actions, that we deserve to be punished for our mistakes and rewarded for our virtues. But if our decisions are merely reflections of our brain's wiring and the environment around us, does guilt or merit even make sense anymore? Imagine a criminal who committed a brutal murder. The justice system will judge and punish him based on the belief that he could have chosen to act differently. But what if this man had a brain tumor affecting his ability to control himself? Should he still be considered just as guilty as someone without that condition? If a biological malfunction can completely change how we judge an action, then how much real control do we have over any of our decisions? This is not just a thought experiment. It has already happened. In 1966, Charles Whitman, a former Marine, killed 16 people in a mass shooting in Texas. He left a letter asking doctors to examine his brain, saying he felt that something was wrong inside him. After his death, an autopsy revealed a tumor pressing against his amygdala, the brain region linked to aggression. What does this mean? That his violence may have been a consequence of a biological factor, something he did not choose. Now expand this logic. If science tells us that all of our choices are the result of genetics, environment, and brain processes that happen before we are even aware of them, what is left of moral responsibility? This puts us face to face with a deep dilemma. If no one is truly responsible for their own decisions, does it make sense to punish criminals? And beyond that, does it make sense to praise someone for their achievements if everything we do is a result of forces beyond our control? Then what is the meaning of effort, ethics, and character? Here, Michel Foucault enters the discussion with a disturbing perspective on the punishment system in Discipline and Punish. He shows how society has turned punishment into a tool of control. In the past, punishments were physical, public, brutal. They served to intimidate and demonstrate power. But over time, punishment became more sophisticated, not just punishing, but disciplining, shaping behavior, making individuals useful to the system. Foucault argues that we don't punish only for the crime committed, but for the threat a person represents to the social order. And this threat is defined based on standards created by society itself. This means that punishment is not just a response to an act, but a mechanism to control who does or does not fit into established norms. This leads us to an even deeper reflection. If our choices are not free, but instead the result of biological and social conditioning, then what we call justice might simply be another way to reinforce that conditioning. Prison doesn't correct an error. It defines who must be isolated so that the system can continue functioning as it is. Determinism, a philosophical view that argues everything is predetermined, suggests that perhaps the best response is not to punish, but to reprogram. Instead of seeing criminals as villains, maybe we should view them as machines with flaws in their code, not something to be punished, but something to be corrected. Likewise, virtues would also be nothing more than results of favorable programming, not necessarily individual merit. This may feel unsettling, but it's already what we do. If a child grows up in a violent environment, surrounded by negative influences, with little education and no access to opportunities, their chances of following a destructive path are significantly higher. If that same child had been born into a stable family with emotional and financial support, they might have grown up to be an example of ethics and success. But did the child have any choice over where they were born? Maybe the real question is not about abolishing responsibility, but about understanding it differently. If we can't freely choose, we can still shape the environment that influences our decisions. We can create societies that reduce the factors leading to crime. We can build contexts that encourage positive behaviors. Maybe true freedom isn't about escaping external influences, but about understanding those influences so we can use them to our advantage. If we don't choose who we are, maybe we can at least choose what to do with it. If you've made it this far, something in this video held your attention. Maybe it was the unsettling feeling that your choices were never truly yours. Maybe it was the discomfort of realizing that your own brain acts before you're even aware of it. Or maybe it was the question now echoing in your mind, if I'm not completely free, then who am I? And that question might change everything. What we've explored here isn't just an academic discussion. It's something that affects the way you live every single day. From small decisions, like what to eat for breakfast, to major choices that shape your path, everything might be determined by forces you don't even notice. Your brain, your environment, your culture, your personal history, your circumstances. Is there truly any space left for something we can call I in the middle of all this? But here's the irony. Maybe freedom was never about making purely independent choices. Maybe true freedom isn't about ignoring these influences, but about recognizing them, understanding them, and learning how to use them to our advantage. If you understand what influences you, you can start changing the direction those forces push you. You can question why you desire what you desire. You can challenge habits, behaviors, and automatic impulses. You may not have chosen to be here, but now that you are, what will you do with it? This discussion doesn't end here. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe in free will? Or do you think we're just spectators of a script that was already written? Let me know in the comments. Let's keep this debate going, because questioning the foundations of our existence is one of the few things that truly make us feel alive. And if this video made you see things differently, share it with someone who needs to hear this too. Because sometimes, the only way to wake up is when someone helps us see what was invisible all along. Thank you for staying until the end. In a world where everything is a distraction, where attention is more valuable than money, you either chose, or were chosen, to stay until the very last moment. And that means, in some way, this conversation found you at the right time. See you in the next video.